G'day and welcome to the Infrunners. I'm XQ. Today I'm joined by SA and Badges. How are you boys doing?
Yeah, not bad. Thanks, mate. Yourself?
I'm tired. It's 3:30 a.m. This episode's going to be out in an hour and a half, so chop chop, lickety split. No, we left it a little late this week, but this actually came because there was a guy that asked a question on the live stream with me and Algrid on Friday, and he basically said, "What do you think is the most minimalistic fleet that you could take out and survive for as long as possible, like self-sustained fleet?" You can call that a survival fleet or an off-the-grid fleet, whatever. And I said, "Oh, that's a kind of a loaded question. Might take a little while to unpack that." I said, "Oh, that might be a good idea for an episode." And here we are. So yeah, we're doing this again. I think this is the third one of these we do called "What Will It Take?" And Badges, you're going to be actually kicking us off the rank this week with your fleet. So do you want to explain your choices? And I just want to say also, as a caveat, there's a couple of caveats we've got to put in. I forgot about that. Food is a really big one when it comes to survivability. We don't know all the mechanics of how food are going to work. So whatever someone's explanation for food is, you just got to go with it because we don't know what it is, right? And then what was the other part that I had to talk about caveats? And I've forgotten.
The expanse, if people want to include it, we don't have a model for it yet.
Yeah, so there's so you've included the spans. I think the only person that did. You're the only person that has to say, "Oh, and there's an expanse," and explain why. But yeah, other than that, there's no right or wrong with this. This is just a bit of fun, and you guys can in the comments below do the same thing, like put down what you would take and stuff like that. So this is just a bit of fun. All right, with that, Badges, take us away.
I love the question because it's one of those things you're like, yeah, I'll spend 30 minutes knocking up an idea. 3 hours later, I think we're still talking about, well, we could do this, we could do that. But this is kind of what I came up with in that one endeavor to do all the food, and that's the food thing done. For me, the Prospector for this is really suited. The Odyssey Prospector combo is really suited because this is what the Odyssey does. So you've got the scanning to find your next group of supplies. Mm-hmm. It's got the Prospector, so you've got that ability to mine. And then just because at the moment we're still not sure if the Odyssey can refine other stuff, I've got the Expanse in there as well. So the Expanse is sat just above my head here. I tried to stay away from as many small ships as I can because they're going to be the most fuel intensive. Mm-hmm. And that's the number one worry of this fleet is fuel. So you've got the Prospector, you've got the mining head on the Odyssey, and the idea is between them, they either shift the Quantanium over to the Starfarer or they refine it themselves through the Odyssey's engines. The Starfarer is a no-brainer for me. It's got a fuel refinery on board. That's where the most of your hydrogen fuel's coming from. And that extra storage space, I really kind of wanted to put a Caterpillar in here, but I kind of figured that it was the first superfluous ship that I wanted, because what I thought was all of those separate modules just full of spares. So the one weakness I think we all were talking about, and certainly the weakness with this fleet, is your inability to manufacture, oh my God, the cooler's gone, it's completely trashed, it's completely broken, and I can't manufacture a new one. So if I had to add anything to this fleet, that would be it. One ship, decent cargo capacity, absolutely full of spares, so that you can replace stuff once you can't repair it anymore.
I would definitely say there's not a single fleet here that doesn't have some form of weakness, because you are really trying to go you're trying to turn knobs and dials to get the best, but there is no perfect. Because one of the things I found very quickly is if you go all out and just have this everything you absolutely need, then you need more and more endeavors because you need more and more food, and then you need more and more repairs, and it just escalates. And I don't think there will be a perfectly self-sustaining fleet. I just don't think it's possible. I think the easiest you would have is something that can stay out for quite a while and have one ship go back and maybe get food and parts. But I don't think you'll ever be able to just go out into the middle of the black and just live there. I just don't think it's possible.
Yes. Absolutely. And this has got the whole idea here is, again, minimalistic. There's very little to transfer stuff ship to ship. So everything relies on docking and everything being safe enough for docking to happen. Because you don't have anything to just there isn't like a Pisces or an MPUV personnel to bounce people from ship to ship to ship. That's just not here. You've got the medical bed in the Odyssey, so that's where that's coming from. And like you say, it's just a point where when you add too many ships, you're looking at another Odyssey, another Prospector, another set of rocks, which will all obviously be in that, and another Starfarer for the hydrogen, because you're just reaching a point where even if they are at it 24/7, they're not going to be able to replenish everything else around them unless the fleet's not moving.
You got any questions for Badger's fleet?
Are those rocks?
Yeah, so the idea is that they would be in with the Odyssey. So at least initially, and then whether they transfer their cargo directly into the Odyssey or the Expanse would depend on, again, what the Odyssey is actually capable. Because we know it can do Quantanium, we know it can do its own fuel stores. But, thinking that things like basic repair will just take a metal. That's the strength of the Expanse. If all I need is titanium and other type metals, you can repair, using the minerals that you're gathering through your Prospector and your rocks and stuff. What's really interesting is like where you go next with this fleet, I think, because one of the things I really wanted to put in was like a reclaimer. And just like anything that you come across, being able to just munch it up and turn it into spare materials for the rest of the fleet, being able to suck out components or fuel, or whether you go something like the Banu Merchantman or whatever store shop style ship will get, which will be smaller, so that when you do happen to come across other fleet or other groups of people, you can trade in that environment and you've got the cargo space and that sort of stuff. So rather than seeking out people to trade, just be like, oh, look, people here and we can barter stuff. Even if we're not using UEC, I can barter, hey, you've got a cool air, I've got some spangly space rocks, let's do this.
At one point, I did have a Kraken so I could land smaller starter ships on it, so like Vulcans or Prospectors and stuff like that. And then I started moving away from that, and I went more and more. Well, when you see mine, you'll understand. But I think mine is easily the smallest by a country mile. So,
well, I think you actually do have a pseudo salvage ship, which is the Crucible, because you have the ability to, take parts off of ships, repair them, or take out components and repair larger components. So you have like a mini salvage capability.
You could definitely land them and strip them on the deck at the very least.
So, you just couldn't refine any stripped material if you actually had to break it down further.
And that's something I kept coming back to, is a lot of the hand tools. Like, you can do all that, it just takes a lot longer. So
absolutely. And that would be my hope, that you could kind of budget so that the Expanse would go on to the Crucible, so that it wasn't you, because that's the fuel weakness. Prospector, rocks all live inside the Odyssey, fine. The Expanse is going to be where most of the fuel's used up because it's smaller. So it's going to be, it's going to be the one that needs to refuel Quantanium all the time, or quantum fuel rather.
One of the things I thought about too is the Endeavour is you could modify it so it's not just for biodomes. You could have also had it so it's half hospital, half food. You could have also had storage or fuel storage, because they have modules for that. There's a whole bunch of different ways you got to build that in Endeavour. Long story
absolutely
short.
And I think the Endeavour, you could end up with like 3 or 4 of them in different configurations until we get the other ships that are going to do that stuff as well. Like it's got general science modules and general kind of manufacturing or servicing modules. Does that mean I can make basic components? Because like you say, the other weakness of this is combat. Because we're not going to be able to make our own missiles. We're not going to be able to make our own ammunition. So where's that coming from? And all of a sudden, you've got this huge logistics chain of either everything in the fleet's going to need to firing the same stuff, or I need a whop-off great big bunch of transports with it to carry all my ammunition. Now I need more fuel. Now I need more food. Now I'm probably going to need more than one med bed, and it starts to snowball from there, really.
I will say that is something very across the board we've all agreed on. I don't think anyone's got combat chips. They're all they don't need combat because I'm just surviving. So yeah, because it's survival. Like to the point that there is no objective for these fleets other than living as long as you can.
Yeah.
And so it's probably a bit unrealistic from that point of view because and SA brought this up several times. Oh, well, SA, you speak on it because you haven't spoken much, SA, but say what you're saying about the objectives and stuff, SA.
Oh, as far as I think what you're referring to is when we were discussing this, you wouldn't necessarily just have a fleet to survive. You'd be doing something. So, are you exploring? Are you looking for planetoids? Are you, looking for alien races trading? Because of that, none of these fleets are going to be ideal for anybody because they're going specifically on just that survival mechanic. How long can I actually live?
Yeah, and I actually like when we were talking about this, X, I love the idea that you came up with where it's almost like it's this UEC race. It's almost like the Tour de France or something like that. It's like, right, you start out in this system all the way over here, and you've got to get to the other end of the known verse.
That was SA.
With all your ships that you started. Yeah, sorry, yes, SA, yeah. And it's almost like that. It's almost like that race idea. It's like that you've got to get to the end with all the ships, like the wacky races sort of. I really like that idea.
That should be a thing. That would be sick. Like how quickly you can get from one side to the other. And I don't think it would just be, well, the obvious caveat to that would be is unassisted. So you have to go from one, because otherwise someone would just get a really fast ship and just stop at every fuel spot.
Mm-hmm.
But it'd be really interesting to see a race like that.
You could probably even do something like the start of that in Hurston currently, because you could set up checkpoints, tell teams they have to refuel with their Starfarer at a certain point, and just run them, in a loop around the system, or maybe to all large planetoids through a station. But yeah, there's a lot of fueling. It's kind of funny because fueling's really opened up a lot of potential gameplay within the current systems.
Yeah. All right, we should probably move on to SA's fleet. Alrighty. All right, SA. Sell us on this.
All right, so there's some similarities between Badgers and my fleet. The Endeavor is purely there for food production. In fact, if we had talked about this originally as well, where my theory for the Carrack was that you could load up one of those containers of storage of nothing but rations, and that would last you for years, depending on what you actually pack, calorie density, a variety of things. And as someone who's eaten far too many MREs, and I won't go into all those jokes, but basically you can survive on some crazy stuff. In addition, sorry, I got to stop you. So for those of us, what are MREs? Just for those of us, meals ready to eat. Sorry, meals ready to eat. It's when you see something from the U.S. military or the British, it's usually a bag, like a brown bag that you rip open, and then you'll see other versions of them around the world. But basically, everything is packed in sous vide sealed containers, and it lasts for years.
Is this the ones where they have like random flavors, like pasta chocolate, or just like they're just completely made up bizarre flavors? Yeah, that you see in the
actually, there's some go-to, like one of there are flavors that you will trade for and barter for. So like for me, it's jalapeno cheese spread, and I love it, but I'll actually collect it because after a couple months, you can trade it to a Marine for whatever you want to get from them. Same thing with like one of the things I thought of is not only with the Endeavor are you going to grow food, you might be growing medical supplies.
Yep.
You might be growing plants that you can use for medicinal purposes, or you might just grow some tobacco and make some chewing. Get some, get a log of dip and trade that to somebody in another ship for whatever they have. But the reality of the Endeavor, as far as like food production, getting back on track, we really have that up in the air.
I'm just going to say, it sounds like you're trying to sell me on the Endeavor. Just want to put that out. Right. Yeah.
Well, the downside of the Endeavor, though, and I say is we don't know until we get the new updated model. We don't know if you can put modules together because they may interfere spatially with each other. But, I almost left the Endeavor out only because you could bring a storage vessel with nothing but food rations in it. I thought about a Caterpillar similar to Badgers. Internal storage might need to be important for atmospheric controls and other things. I even thought of a Hercules because you're kind of in that middle ground. But the truth is, I'd probably bring a second Carrack because the storage capacity is actually fairly similar.
Much like what you're saying there too, because you and I talked about this as well. The modules of the Carrack itself. So we should probably talk about that too, because we talked about the modules of the Endeavor. Like, we don't know what they're going to be, and one that you and I keep coming back to all the time. Talk about the bio thing that you were talking about, the biodome.
Oh, so like there are two that I thought are no-brainers for the Carrack for storage, or for those modules. One of them would be a hydroponic bay, so that you could grow fruits and vegetables, especially for an extended trip. That might be something that you would want to do, or just, we know it has a science lab and we've seen the plants in that upstairs. Once you're starting to, cultivate these things, or, what are you going to do with them? But the ability to transport living plants and harvest them could be a thing. And it's a thing now. I've seen they have urban farms where people take shipping containers, those metal large container boxes, connexes, and convert them over to hydroponic bays to grow different vegetables in cities. So I could see that. Also, I think a no-brainer for the Carrack is a refinery, a mini refinery on the Carrack so that it could make its own fuel. For an exploration ship, it's a fairly large container. It's about it seems like it would fit the interior of the Expanse in one of those containers, just from the art.
I would probably argue that one specifically, something that hooks up with rocks. So you kind of drop it off, and it you take the rocks up to it, and it just gets you enough to get the Carrack going, type of thing. Yeah,
and the ability to drop those pods is extremely valuable for this long trip, because you might want to bring the Carrack down, set up a camp on a planet, on a planetoid where they're doing nothing but mining or harvesting resources. You don't want to necessarily bring down all your other ships.
So for me, when I look at the Carrack, I look at its abilities it already has and extending them. So it's got a repair bay, so I think some kind of repair module. I look at the medical bay. A repair base, so it's a medical base, so it's some kind of extension of that. One thing I also bring up too is it's like the Enterprise. So think about all the things the Enterprise does in the Star Trek shows, and basically humanitarian relief, a science lab, and that's probably where you and I slightly differ. I think the bionical lab, the hydroponics lab might be a science lab that you can just happen to grow some stuff in. But the other thing you and I both talked about too is something like a farm module, where you drop it on the ground and you can just grow stuff in a like a blow up tent type thing, which I think could be a thing as well. We just don't know. Like, it's really. I think the safest bet is to say what the ship has and extend it, and then anything else after that is hopeful.
Well, the Carrack has a couple of key features that we know it's going to have. Like the repair drones, for example, will be invaluable to any type of deep space exploration or longer trip. We know it has that printer, the ability to actually print components or small parts that you might need for repair and replacement. It not only does it have the high tier medical bed, it has those two secondaries, so you can have multiple patients. Has the science lab, and probably to me one of the important ones that I didn't. We don't know what the Odyssey is going to have, but we know what the Carrack is intended to do is the cartography portion of it, the ability to actually see around you. So you're scanning, you're monitoring, you're able to keep your eyes and ears out. I'm going to jump down a little bit and go to the Pisces and the Ursa and the Rock, because the idea in my mind is that those all live in that Carrack, and that Pisces is your runabout. It's the thing that can go down to planet. Originally, it was going to be used to map jump points back in the Carrack's concept. That could come back at some point. The Ursa is because you have that vehicle bay without a cargo grid. It has the ability to have atmospheric control exploration of planetoids. So the ability to drop that Ursa off, and it could actually take your people out there to look for things. And then the Rock is purely that refuel capacity, especially if they ever do a refinery module for the Carrack. The ability to put a rock in there would be valuable.
Well, you could always chop and change there too, because you got the Starfarer and you got the Carrack, so you can either keep. Well, I actually reckon you could have added another rock, so to speak. So you could have had the Rover in the Carrack and 2 rocks in the Starfarer, or swap them over or whatever. Well, so you could add more rocks if you wanted to.
Yeah, the only reason I don't have just a Carrack as my fleet is because we don't know if there'll be a refinery module. Yeah. Because the truth is the Carrack is so versatile is that if it had the ability to make its own fuel, you could probably stay on it indefinitely. With the ability of being able to go to Planetoids and find other food sources. The Starfarer is, so I have a couple of interesting theories about the Starfarer, and I think Badger's opinion on this would be beneficial too when we're talking about the Carrack and the Starfarer. So we're military guys, and the one thing you don't do is store hazardous materials with your food. So, you might, if you have some in the Carrack, you might put a few in the Starfarer because it wouldn't take out all your food sources. But I look at that Starfarer as being an incredibly versatile ship because the other thing that it can store beyond hydrogen fuel, quantanium, liquids. With the ability to maybe fill up one of those with water so that you actually have additional liquid capacity within, for survival purposes, for food purposes. And then that storage container, that's where I put all my parts. So just crucial components inside the storage of the Starfarer, just loaded up with all of the pieces and parts that you may need that would wear out over time, which we don't know yet, but we know those mechanics are coming. The parts will wear out.
As long as you can transfer water to normal cargo storage, there's no reason you couldn't store it in the Carrack as well. Because they do have liquid cargo containers, so you could just transfer it to smaller ones and then say use something smaller to EVAM over, so that is possible too. All right.
The Prospector is the quantanium / mining piece to provide for that Starfarer. Pretty straightforward. And the only thing that I want to point out on the overall flexibility is that there is definitely a lack of security within this fleet. But there actually is a decent amount between the Carrack and the Starfarer. You're not completely vulnerable. The Endeavor's a gigantic, sitting target.
Well, you can always drop the cab off and try and fight with the cab too. So, and you got the Pisces. So, you depends what turns up, doesn't it? If you get a Kraken turning up with a whole bunch of ships, well, you kind of stuff. But if you get like a Hornet turn up, I think you'd take care of it. So, yeah. All right, then on to mine, where I think I'm about to get really roasted, but here we go. So, yeah, mine's very tiny. And my logic behind this is really kind of using the Pisces like a jerry can. So you're mining and refining with the Odyssey. I picked the Odyssey also because it did have med beds. It had more storage. You can keep the rock in either ship, but if you land the Carrack in either ship, you can fill it up with fuel from one and transfer it to the other. So it's kind of like a jerry can. And between the two of them, they should be able to, repair. Like you could transfer modules with the Pisces as well, so you could repair stuff for the Odyssey in the Pisces and vice versa. And I just thought that was very minimalistic because you don't really need a lot of people. It's kind of like what Essay said, you could almost just have a Carrack and get away with it, but it didn't have the refinery. So I was like, well, the only ship I know that can refine and do that stuff is the Odyssey. But I did at one point look at my other version of this was basically just an Expanse and a Prospector. But like you also brought up, Badgers, that means I had two small ships that slowed me down heaps. And I like the idea of just having two big ships that could basically move at the same speed. And
that's the beauty of really is the beauty of the Carrack and of the Odyssey is that you get right into orbit, and then that small ship or the Pisces, whatever it is, does the to surface stuff, so you're not burning the inane amount of hydrogen fuel it takes to get one of those things down to the surface and, more importantly, back up again. That's what your Pisces is doing. And yeah, I really like it. Were you not tempted then to put a small into the Odyssey, or are you saving that for cargo space? What's the plan there?
What was that, sorry?
Were you tempted to put a small ship into the Odyssey?
I did, but I went through everything and I couldn't think of anything I actually wanted to bring, because I would have brought the Vulcan for repairs, but it was too big. The Prospector I could take, but it wasn't really necessary because the Odyssey can do it itself. And the Apollo's too big, and I don't need it because I've got two sets of 2 medical beds. If there's a really serious injury where you're kind of stuffed, but also you got 2 ships that have, at least there's like 16 people between the two here. Yeah, I just didn't see it, but it does rely heavily on that Pisces. So I guess if I had another one, I'd probably add a second Pisces, believe it or not, because then you can actually universally swap them between the two. So you could keep. Well, yeah, actually, that's a really good idea. Think about it. Yeah, two Pisces, because you could literally just keep tossing them between the two if you want to transfer things.
Yeah.
So that's probably where I'd go. I could easily add another rock. I didn't add a rover, so I could almost go up to like 4 rocks if I wanted to, and they just all scurry across the surface and do stuff. Because to me, the rover was superfluous because it doesn't add to survivability.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got scanners and stuff, but you've got the 2 ships there with you as well, so they can scan as well. So every time just went over stuff, it just became more and more redundant. And so I was just like, why don't they just take a whole lot of food and just go as long as they can. And again, like SA said, if they bring out modules like that are going to have food and stuff, that'll change it as well. But the Endeavor itself was just too much of a commitment to go to a really big fleet. And the question was, what is the most minimal? And I think this is as small as I can get. And like SA, I do think you could go just the Carrack. You really, really could. And there is a reason why it's one of the most popular ships in the game. I'll put it this way, one of the most popular big ships in the game. I think it's like the 7th, or they did a vote, I think it was like 2015, 2016. I'd have to go back and look at it now. And it was like the 6th most popular ship. And considering how big it is, that's pretty insane. And the first 2 were like the Aurora and the Mustang. And then it was the Vanguard and then the Titan or something like that. And I bet you the Vanguard's not there anymore.
And hey, look, if I had to go that way, I've got to go into bat for the Odyssey here, because we don't want to make this another Odyssey versus Carrack episode. But lots have been said on the Carrack's behalf, and I feel like the Odyssey needs a champion to step in for it. Oh, White Knight, you Odyssey, it's okay, I've got your back. But I, if those two, if I had to drop one, I would drop the Carrack, because I don't see what the Carrack's bringing.
I would as well, actually. With current specs, I'd drop the Carrack.
Yeah. Absolutely, because it makes everything we've talked about, everything SA's mentioned, and you've mentioned X about what would fit in those modules, makes absolute sense, except in certain circumstances from gameplay balance. For the Carrack to suddenly sprout refinery modules and the ability to generate its own fuel completely or partially certainly invalidates the Odyssey.
I don't agree with SA on the refinery module. I think it's more likely to have expansion of what it already has. So I did state that before.
Potentially a fuel tank module. Absolutely. And trading off that space for longer range.
And if it was to get a refinery module, I think it would be like an emergency type of thing where you might like even remove the rocks, because let's be honest, you don't take rocks to stand on a Carrack. So it would be some kind of module you drop off, you fucking hand mine, and it gets you enough to just get you 1 warp to go to the next place. And that would be it. You pick it back up and you go. We do know the cargo module can carry vehicles, so you can have up to the big vehicles in there, like a ballista or a Nova tank. So you can, that's all, they've already confirmed that. The growing of food, the one thing that this episode has shown me doing this, and I think you'll agree, food is way more important than we realized. And I started thinking of, we know you can grow the farms in space, but farms on ground are going to be a thing. And then I started thinking about raw food and actually cooking food. And so bigger kitchens are going to be able to cook more elaborate foods. I'm expecting some small ships will just, you take food in and all it's going to do is dehydrate it so it lasts longer, and that's it, and then I started thinking of other things like morale. If we go out with just ready to eat meals for 6 months, how unhappy are people going to be when you come back? They're going to be, and we do know that that's a thing.
To tell you how unhappy I've been.
But I did for a second toy with the idea of putting an 890 jump in, because at one point we were talking about the different fleets. We were like, I can't remember whether it was UX or USA mentioned Battlestar Galactica and the idea of keeping moving for moving's sake, right? And I love the idea of having, exactly as you were saying there, X, an 890 jump as a holiday destination for the other ships in the fleet. It's like, well done, you are employee of the month. Your reward, a weekend on the 890 jump where you get to eat some real food, and drink real wine and not this stuff made from, urine recyc. Shout out to the Red Dwarf fans that will get that one.
But it does make you start to wonder, like, are they going to have a restaurant ship? Are they going to have and you even look at shops like the Privateer and the Banner Merchantman. Can you have a shop on your own ship that is a restaurant, and you could have a job as a cook? I'm not kidding. Like, I started to think, like, it's way more detailed than I realized. Food could be a really big thing, because at the moment, like, you look at in game, you've got water and fizzy drinks, and they've literally said they're going to have different stamina buffs. So essentially, I'm trying to compare it to another game, but you know how you get alchemists in WoW and stuff like that, and they make the potions? That's what the cooks are. They're basically making all the buffs.
There's certainly
Galaxy's had that as well. Galaxy's had an extremely elaborate food and medical system where you couldn't be a solo crafter in Star Wars Galaxies. You needed an organization to support you with all the materials. But then you'd have doctors that would sell buffs back in the day, and if they got the best materials and they did the best thing, you would get the best buffs. You would have to eat less, and it had a lot of value, especially in PvP. So I see cooking and science and creation being something that they can put some interesting mechanics behind.
And you can see how they're all, like, farming and that is all interconnected, because farming goes off to medical, but farming also goes off to cooking. And then you've got, like, hunting that comes in, because, like, you can kill exotic animals to cook, but then hunting goes off to medical as well, and then off to science. Like, I'm just starting to see all these really intricate overlays, and it's deep.
Because at the base level, there's almost certainly going to be some sort of NPC crew morale component.
There is. They talked it way
the
back.
Way you treat them.
Way back in the design days, like, if you don't pay them properly, if you don't, like, let them go to the toilet and stuff, they'll get miserable. And if
they don't get enough shore leave and all that sort of stuff.
The star rating system that they've talked about before. The NPCs can rate you down. So if you don't treat them properly, your rating can drop. So it's kind of interesting to see where that's going to go.
Will continue and some morale improves. Absolutely. This was a really interesting thought exercise, and it just kept going, because you were like, well, okay, how do I add components to a fleet without the ability to manufacture them? Well, the Reclaimer at the minute, maybe the medium or the large, salvage ships, so when we get that far, we'll have the ability to go and find those components with drones or whatever. And then it's like, okay, well, how do I add this? How do I add that? And like you said, because one of the interesting ships, I think, for this that none of us have touched on is the Liberator.
I did think of a carrier, but the carrier doesn't exist, because the way you could do lots of small starter ships would be if they could all land on a carrier, and you could just carry, like, all the starting variants of ships. But one thing that you touched on there, where you were talking about repair and stuff, is I actually think it shows repair could be a little bit more than just. So one of the repair ships we think, we got the medium and the large kind of to go, is one could be like a vehicle repair one, like a driving garage or whatever. But the other one I thought about is, what if a ship that was designed to craft components? So it's like I don't even know what you could call that, but it would literally work with the Reclaimer and the Crucible. Like, you could feed it materials. But the more I've gone over that, the more I think it might be more likely restricted to the buildings, because that's in line with a manufacturing plant and stuff. Same thing with weapons. You can't make your own weapons, so therefore I think it might be the same thing where you can't make your own components, because it does mean eventually you've got to go back to places.
I think components now are too closely tied to different manufacturers and stuff, so maybe you're able to do kind of duct tape and super glue sort of spot repairs with something, but I'm not sure how far down that route, because they've kind of said they don't want us crafting to that extent, or there are no plans for us to be crafting to that extent, which is why I'll be really interested to see what the science module and that for the Endeavour actually end up allowing us to do.
Come on, Badgers. Let's be honest. We all know you wanted to make a Badgers medical pen just so you could stab it in people's asses, right?
I mean, something branded CIG Gib, please. But yeah, no, it's been a really interesting thought exercise. This, and
I thought my fleet
the minute
would.
you add something else. But the reason I mentioned the Liberator is because it is that drive-in garage, and it does remove the fuel responsibility from the Prospector for your fleet essay, giving it somewhere to land so you don't have that fuel requirement for it constantly. It's got a fairly significant SCU storage. It's got the ability to hand refuel stuff, repair stuff. It's got a minimum crew requirement. The Liberator's actually potentially got a little niche in that area, and then you've got an inside garage. It can go down, it can do the landing, it can take stuff down, and I wouldn't mind betting the Liberator is going to be lesser fuel requirement in that regard than an Odyssey or a Carrack.
Yeah, you could actually see it working with the rocks and stuff too, plus having two ships on top of it that you can kind of, Sorry,
absolutely.
So this brings up an interesting concept of the true journey that we're talking about, because in my mind, let me back that up. I think we all potentially have a different view of what that would be, because in my mind, it wouldn't be your nonstop moving your Battlestar Galactica. It would actually be getting to a system, scanning, finding the resources you need to get to the next system so that you can continue your journey. So I actually had the thought process of, I might need to land, leave the Endeavor's tail end in orbit and take all the other ships down to the ground so they don't use fuel, and then mine and grow food, and then pack all back up like a caravan, and then go back up into orbit and take off. So in a very strange way, we're saying that it's this long journey, but it's not necessarily perpetual motion. It could be moving from A to B, but you just don't know where B is yet until you get there.
Yeah. What place does a Pioneer have in this? Are we going to be able, as a fleet, to build it, to gather enough resources to perpetually build outposts on planets and just use it until it's done and then move on, or leave a skeleton crew behind or whatever? But use it to mass pump fuel out of the floor, and because in effect
skeletons, but
it definitely. The thing I found is the more I thought on it, the more questions it raised. It was kind of like the food thing, because the food thing, I just went down the food because I was just like, wow, we've never really sat and thought about food. But then, like you said, I did think of the Pioneer, and I thought of all the other, like, could I have an Apollo in there? Could I have a Kraken in there? And I went through all this stuff, and my initial thought was, oh my God, my fleet is going to balloon. And then I just went, let's go the other way, because the less people I have, the longer I'm going to be there. And that's why I ended up with where I was. So we've all kind of gone different paths, and I was actually kind of surprised how similar they were. They're like what, maybe a couple of ships, like yours and SA is only a couple of ships, but I still had the same core thoughts. You just had a bit more stability. So Starfarer for me would make a lot of sense. But as I said, I probably would have more likely, instead of a Starfarer, I would have just gone a Prospector and an Expanse, because I don't think you need that much fuel. And then I would have dropped the Odyssey and had a Carrack. So it just had.
Yeah, and that could be a thing. I mean, you could just be, you're filling up your tanks and going to the next location. And there's this very strange thing that this brought out, this exercise brought out in my mind, which was, actually three things. First one is, there are clearly ships that don't exist currently that could exist in these gaps that we find in this type of support structure.
Yep.
Like a ship that does build a well, or like instead of building a crucible, something that actually could build an outpost that's smaller than a Pioneer, that could just put down a living habitat or something like that, or just a bunk ship. Ship that purely could support people on the ground.
After today, this whole exercise, I actually can see a farmer ship. Like, it lands and it deploys tents. So it's similar to the biodomes, but it just deploys them on the ground. And then it has some kind of hydroponics lab in the center and a bed. And you just land, it unfolds, you grow your shit, you pack up, go back to market, sell, go to another planet, do it again.
I'd be very surprised if we don't get something like that from the Pioneer or smaller ships, as you say, similar to the ones that you see at some outposts you go to. I forget what the family farms, near ArcCorp. and they've got all these mini little and they're just carbon copies of each other. Just plonk,
Well,
there you go, fabricate another one. Done.
Well, see, the part I'm thinking of is instead of building them bespokely like the Pioneer does, they are bespoke. So you could literally have a farm ship that lands and farms. You could have a ground mining ship that lands and ground mines. You could have a ship that lands and deploys defense turrets. Rather than the Pioneer bespokely building every single one. But at the moment, we only have the top of the tree for building. We need to see the other side of it so we understand. And that'll come in the interest of time. Maybe they don't know how it works yet either. So we're only just seeing that for refining, because we're literally just getting the refining coming in the next couple of weeks. So that,
There's another side of that building on site thing, though, which is bringing things with you and manually configuring. So I'd actually considered in my first fleet a Hull E. Because the idea of that is you could load all those containers with the ability, have a Hull A to unload it, and you would go to a planet, be able to potentially unload those containers with tents, with building supplies, potentially connect them if they're living habitats. So like the potential is huge. And then there's the last thing is there are mechanics that are currently either not in game, or there are ships that need reworks. Yeah. And when those things happen, this whole, it's like, it really opened my eyes to like what I thought I was originally going to do in game, because I got a Freelancer Dur. First I got a Freelancer, and then eventually I got a Dur, and I ended up melting it. But I wanted to be like, load up that, it had the refinery in it, and it's for hydrogen fuel. And, now it's, what is that ship going to be? It could be your one-man ship, but it clearly needs a rethinking of what is that going to be for that ship.
Yeah. I think for me, it's still reinforced, to bring this full circle back to kind of Infernos type stuff. It's still reinforced to me because there's still so many unknowns. Get that big ship, and then I can just earn everything underneath. I came back to that. That's where I was, because I was like, what is going to be my thing at the end of this video I want to talk about? And I just came back to that again. I was just like, one big ship, and I can get whatever I want. It doesn't matter, because at the moment there's just too many unknowns. Food, all that stuff that came up. So
yeah. And that's kind of where I was going with the whole, where do you go next with one of these fleets, is the Orion could be a great ship.
Yeah.
Depending on what the materials that you're mining, the metals and stuff, depending on how useful they are in kind of end game stuff. And you can go through all of those ships like a carrier. A carrier's tailor-made for stuff like this, because it just massively increases the amount of ships that you can use without an increased fuel cost necessarily.
We haven't even got into the part where if you can build your own manufacturing, like in small quantities in little towns and stuff. So if you can actually build, because we know that we've seen the refineries and the mining stuff, right? But if you can actually build your own manufacturing facilities and eventually make your own weapons and make your own components and stuff like that, but it must be in a base of some description or on planet or something like that, that could change everything as well, because we haven't talked about that. So yeah, the only one we have for manufacturing right now is the player controlled ones that you can take over and control. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, anything else you guys want to add before we wrap up shop? But it was very eye opening, yeah. But for me, it was.
I'd like to know from anybody viewing this. Your fleet, obviously, if you have a different fleet or you think there's a different ship that fits in a better role. But this brought up a really interesting thing for me, which is I think there are a lot of players, including myself, that kind of want to do that hermit, go out in the black by themselves. So it may not even be what's your ship, what's your strategy? So if I take a Dur, what cargo am I going to take with me to survive? Is it just food and water? Now that we've had this conversation, is it going to be farming equipment? Is it going to be potentially a mobile industrial refinery box or something? Like, what are the things that you would want to do to survive if you plan on being out there by yourself?
Because you brought up the Dur as a solo survivable ship too. Because what is that Freelancer doing with all that cargo space? Is it just like 90% food, and you're hoping you find something rare that you bring back with you? Because I've thought about this before. Why has the Dur got so much cargo space? But yeah, now I think about it, it's got to be food and bit of basic medical needs and stuff like that. But it's interesting. I'm kind of starting to look at some of the ships in different lights, because once you add those things, like how much of their cargo space is automatically gone,
Yes.
You start looking at things like the MSR, like how much basic food and and basic cargo is that going to carry? You know, and it's only got 96 SCU, and the constellation's the same, and like they're going to have to be some kind of basic level if you're going. Okay, let's put it this way: say you're going from Stanton to Pyro, right? You're going to have some kind of basic survival kit that you carry. It's probably different going from, say, Crusader to Hurston, because that's fine. You know, it's a short trip. You know, overkill. But if you're going from one side of Stanton to the other side of Pyro, what could go wrong? What do I need? What do I need to take?
I think a lot of. I think what we're going to find when Pyro hits is we're going to find a lot of abandoned and dead players in the Expanse. That because there's one thing that there's not a mechanic currently in the game for it, which is your warning. Hey, you're at 45% of fuel use. So you got a choice. So either you're going to keep going forward or you're going to turn around.
So SA is going to take Badger's job as a coastal lifeguard, and he's just going to rescue floaters all day. Just
phrasing.
Yeah, sorry. All right, then let us know in the comments below what you would like to, you know, if you did a fleet like this, let us know, because it really did prompt a lot more discussion than the other two of these that we've done, and just because it was just a little bit off the cuff and a little bit different, and as you can hear from both these gents and myself, yeah, a little different. So let us know your thoughts on what you would build. Does it shed some light on some stuff for you? So maybe try do the fleets yourself, and you might go through the same steps we did, and it starts getting a lot of things ticking over. And I was kind of surprised how this one was just so different. It because you're trying to go. The way I try to explain it to these guys, the more people you have, the more shit you needed. So it was this balancing act that, you know, you're almost like dialing knobs and stuff, and if one went too high, you had to lower the other. So it was very much a juggling act compared to the other. A lot of the others were more straightforward than this one anyway. So yeah. All right, anything else you guys want to add, or we're all done?
I'm all good.
Awkward silence.
All good here.
All right, well, he's been Badgers, he's been SA, and I've been Execute, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Execute. Dialing knobs in Star Citizen.
You love playing with knobs.